Welcome to another special Monday evening episode Pound for Pound Boxing Report. For those who are not watching Monday Night Football, I hope you're enjoying yourself, checking us out, talking all things boxing. I'm your host Michael. Joining me this week, usual cast of characters: Gail from NYFights.com, Daniel from Four Boxing News and the Inscriber. What's going on, Gail and Daniel?
Listen, you do not need to be watching Monday Night Football. Taylor Swift is not there, and we are here to talk boxing.
For those who are for those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report, live YouTube show, podcast, blog, website, etc. Talking all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science in any form or fashion, it will get discussed. If you want to find out all things related to Pound for Pound Box Report, check out the site p4pboxingreport.com. If you wish to email us with any comments, questions, suggestions, etc., you can do so. p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you can check out where to catch the show on all podcast platforms, be it Spotify, be it Apple Podcasts, be it Anchor, Google Podcast, which, as a side note, will Pound for Pound Box Report will not be on Google Podcasts not too long because Google Podcasts, they're getting ready to end their venture. I think they're moving everything to YouTube Music, I believe it is. So just a bit of a note before then. I think they're going to do that in early 2024. But yeah, where you can check out your favorite podcast. You can. It's a good bet. You can find Pound for Pound Box Report also on the site. If you would like to donate, doesn't matter for us if it's $1, $2, $5. Let donation be the best nation. Cash Me and PayPal donation links on the site. Last and certainly not least, for those who are fitness enthusiasts, wanting to get their fitness game up as we get ready to head into the holiday season. We're in October, so Halloween will be at the end of the month, and then you know what follows after that, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Please check out the link to BODI, Body, formerly known as Beachbody On Demand. Body, any and all kinds of fitness programs, whatever your interest may be. If you into weightlifting, check out programs like Lift 4, Lift More, Body Beast. If you're looking to challenge yourself with hardcore hit, functional style workouts, please check out programs like 645, 6 weeks of the work, the P90X series 1, 2, and 3. They still are very, very effective. Also, programs like Morning Meltdown, who wants a morning type of workout schedule. For those who are into yoga, you got yoga programs. Again, if all realms of the fitness spectrum, you can find programs for your interest on body. Excuse me. At the very least, take advantage of the 14-day trial, and that is if you do so for 14 days, you get free access to any and all programs on body, including the new program Chop Wood, Carry Water. They have a sample workout there. The full program is expected to drop early 2024, but they have a sample workout currently running on body. So again, please check out the link to the body fitness page, fitness app over on Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Let's get things going. A lot of fights that took place this weekend and a lot of fights to preview. So what we're going to do is the main fight of this past week. All of us are going to have our say so into that, and then we're going to split things up, and then the usual format, go into the news, and we're going because there's so many fights that's happening on October 7th to be specific. Going to split those up as well. Let's talk about the big fight of the week, and that is the battle between undisputed super middleweight champion Canelo Alvarez defending his belts against undisputed 154-pound champion Jermall Charlo. And there is a reason I named this particular episode All Talk and Little Action, Gail, because what was that? Particularly from one Jermall Charlo. Canelo knocked Charlo down in the 7th round en route to an easy unanimous decision. Uh, I, like a fool, thought that uh, Jermell was going to back up his talk by bringing the fight to Canelo. I thought that Jermell had the skill set to give Canelo not only problems but possibly beat him. All he did was jab throughout this fight. He didn't follow it up. He didn't fight with any force. He was timid all night long. And watching the fight, you know, I basically dozed off for periods because the fight was that boring. And after he got hurt and put down in round seven, he capitulated, and it seemed like he just wanted to go the distance and collect a paycheck. I'm
I'm
thoroughly
thoroughly
disappointed
disappointed.
in the performance of Jermell Charlo.
I think you speak for a whole lot of people. Maybe there was a reason that Canelo wasn't he promoting some new energy drink or something. She should have had some of that while watching this fight. It's such a disappointment. I think we were all so surprised at first that Jermell versus Jermall, his bigger in theory brother, wasn't the opponent. And then we all warmed up to the idea, particularly because, Charlo had really talked it up. He's always been such a confident fighter. But he was coming off a long layoff after an injury. And that, I think, was the root of the problem. Ring rust is real. Well, haven't we seen that? Look at even Errol Spence. Ring rust. It's real. Fighters need to stay active. Fighters need to keep those joints oiled and everything firing, and especially the mind needs to be active and in the game, and he just wasn't in the game. On the other side of the coin, Canelo has also had I don't think as serious an injury, but took time off, but he's had a few fights back since then and finally felt he was past his injury where he could really take out his punching power for a spin. And he didn't take the fight for granted. He moved from San Diego to Truckee, California, South Sierra Nevada mountain range, think Lake Tahoe, to get a little altitude training, build up his stamina, which he's frequently taken hits for not having the best conditioning. So unfortunately, the most degraded version of Jermall Charlo, both mentally and physically, met the most on fire version of Old Cinnamon in a long time. Bad timing for Charlo. He looked horrible. It looked like not too many rounds into the fight, he decided my only victory is not to get knocked out. I don't want to take any incoming fire. I don't want to be aggressively offense minded because he's an expert counterpuncher. I also think that Charlo was very surprised at the level of skill that Canelo shows defensively. His upper body movement has improved so much over his career. He is much more defensively responsible than he used to be, and far more than most Mexican fighters. And when you're met with that, when you're met with the punching potential, with that fired up attitude he seems to have, it was a recipe for disaster for Charlo, and he looked horrible. And he's really, unfortunately, damaged his reputation. Not because he lost, but because of the way he lost. Let's think about somebody else who's had some really bad losses, who's gotten the crap kicked out of him. Deontay Wilder. Every loss that Wilder had, some of them were bad, but he always went out on his shield. He fought, he tried to throw till the bitter end until he was forced to stop in each fight, either by being flat on the canvas or corner throws in the towel. So we welcome seeing Wilder back. He doesn't take that kind of hit to his reputation. He talks a lot of game. He does his best, and we admire him for that, even if he loses. Charlo talked game. Charlo talked shit. And instead of it being lions only, I'm looking at it thinking, this is kittens only. This is horrible.
The damn cub.
Yeah, it was awful. Just awful. And it's hard to see where he goes from here, honestly.
100%. I'll go to you, Daniel. I agree with Gail in that Canelo had fought with more fire, had more pep in his step in this fight, right? One of my criticisms heading in about the redhead was that I wondered if he was past his prime because he didn't have the energy in previous fights, whether his most prior fight against John Ryder, the fight with Bivol, right? He didn't have the vigor, fight with the same vigor and passion in those two fights. He had the pepper in this fight, and he did some excellent things. And to Gail's point about the head movement and the underrated defense. However, at the same time, it still seemed like um, he there's levels to this, right? And Canelo, it seemed, in my opinion, to me, knew after a while he didn't have to go into second, third, fourth gear because Jermell was so hesitant, was so tentative. I'm not going to use the word scared, but he didn't let the shots go at all.
Yeah, this was a very, very unfortunately disappointing fight because obviously because of the bluster that Mel and Maul have spoken over the years. Remember this, they have been chasing, both of them have been chasing Canelo for years. Almost every single time throughout the years, you hear whenever they did an interview, Cinnamon, where are you? And this was the time to back up, meaning to talk. But I started looking at how the fight started progressing, especially after the first round, because the first round they just literally went around each other, and I think they threw what, two jabs at each other. I remembered something that I said earlier, after a few weeks ago, when I was talking about the weight disparity. I mentioned the BH1 show that was old, like old reality TV, but it's called Celebrity Fit Club, and it's just basically a bunch of D-list celebrities that they go on a diet. They put them on the diet. One of the last things that they do for the people that are still in the show near the end is they give them a backpack or like a mold of the weight that they lost in fat, and they have them walk around with it. That looked a lot like what Mel was going through in this fight, because we have to remember he has fought up to this fight essentially his entire career 154. He may actually walk around his weight being 168, maybe 170, but that's walking around, not actually getting in ring shape. And you probably saw some of that coming into it because he wasn't as fast as he normally is. His movements weren't as crisp as it normally is. And then the second part, probably that fell into it, was they did not realize that Canelo has naturally built up to this weight over his career. Started 154, slowly built to middleweight, now it's 168. He's more acclimated to that weight, and his punching power showed it. Like one of the esteemed people that we know that works with CompuBox, Lee Groves, I think he mentioned it on Twitter that you could hear Canelo's punches through your headphones. You couldn't hear Mel's punches through it. And honestly, yeah, I do agree that Mel mentally probably checked out right after that knockdown. He probably saw, okay, I can't hurt him, but he's able to hurt me. I just need to survive. And just the way that it came out in the post-fight interview, afterwards I say, oh, Canelo knocked these guys out. He didn't knock me out. And then in the post-fight presser, they're saying, I'm proud of my performance. Like, no, I'm sorry. You guys you and your brother talked a lot of trash over the years. You and your brother wanted this opportunity for a lot of years. You had it right there. You had somebody in Canelo who we all thought, okay, he's lost his step. Maybe he's on the beginning of the downturn. Maybe somebody that's going to be young and hungry, or not that much younger, but somebody that's probably hungrier is going to catch him, and it's going to be over. Maybe this time it's going to be Mel. Nope, that didn't happen. And the last time we've seen something like this happen when it comes to a Canelo opponent, if I remember correctly, as far as somebody that had that much weight disparity when they came up, was Amir Khan. But even Amir Khan went out on this shield. Granted, it's Amir Khan. His chin is made in Khan candy. Amir Khan went out in this shield. Mel didn't. And just to see the level of disgust that came afterwards, like, you know how bad it is for Bud, like the person that we just saw systematically disassemble Errol Spence, who, if he has his sights locked on you, he's gonna target you. To have him pretty much say, you know what, you're no longer worth it. That's telling. That's very, very telling. And if you're Mel, like, you gotta look yourself in the mirror, because number one, you're no longer in dispute because the WBO took the title from you, and now it's in the hands of Tim Tszyu. And two, people are going to remember this performance for a long, long time. Because it's one thing to, like, if you had a situation like Amir Khan, like a Kell Brook versus Gennady Golovkin, where you're coming up in 2 weight classes and you're at least trying. You're overmatched, but you're at least trying. It's a difference between that and just fighting at a point just to survive. Fans remember the latter one very, very negatively, and that's the challenge that Mel's not going to look forward to for a good few years.
%, 100%. And and I'm going to follow up on what you just on the last portion of your comment to talk about what's next for these two, right? Let's start with Mel. I'm going back to you on this one, Daniel. After the fight, after that appalling dismay from him, he was in the ring post-fight talking about, he wants a fight with Bud Crawford, right? Saying he's going back to 154 to make it happen. How the nerve, the gall of this dude to call for that kind of fight after that kind of performance, to the point that Bud went on social media, went on Twitter, because I refuse to call it X, went on Twitter and said that I'm not going to entertain a fight with Jermall Charlo anymore, because the man basically embarrassed himself Saturday night. He lost the WBO belt when he stepped in the ring, right? Tim Tszyu is now officially WBO champion. He's going to fight Mendoza at the end of this month. Given that paltry display, that weak-willed performance on his part, where does Jermall Charlo go from here? Will he ever get a big fight after this lackluster outing?
You can take him out of pay-per-view pretty much for the foreseeable future. You can take him out of that discussion. Even with Bud Crawford, who he has made himself into a pay-per-view star with that performance against Spence, you can take Mel out of that equation. And that's the interesting part, because if Bud doesn't want to fight, if Bud decides to stay around at least 1 or 2 more fights at 147, which we know that his rematch with Spence, that's as ill-advised as it was, that's going to be the way that he's going to do it. So that means that means Bud's going to be busy. So what do you do at that point? You have 3 other belts. Like, the only logical fight that you can make is Tim Tszyu. Is to go get the belt that you technically didn't lose in the ring. But because of this performance, and even with Australian money backing this, it's going to be less cachet for you to come in, less of an attraction to come in, because at this point, then you're only bringing your belts. And after that, like, there's not much you can do. Like I said, Mendoza, he's busy with Mel. Do you fight Lubin again? Which I don't think I need to see that again. Do you fight, I don't know, Fundora? Because he's during the same weight class? I don't know. That knockout of Mendoza, that's still pretty fresh in people's minds when it comes to Sebastian Fundora. So there isn't a lot of options, unfortunately. Like, the logical option is going after Tim Tszyu. Now, barring a extreme upset by Mendoza in beating Tim Tszyu, that's the logical fight to make. And it's probably the fight that Tim Tszyu will take. Unfortunately, but in this case, Mel, because of this performance, has left, we can safely assume he's left millions on the table.
Move from him to Canelo, Gail. I guess you can call this an impressive performance, right? He basically did what he wanted to do. Again, in my opinion, he didn't even have to step out of first gear to win in dominant fashion. What's up next for Canelo? A lot of us hardcore fans and people who follow the folks on the regular would love to see him in there against Benavidez, but we also know over the past few months following Crawford's win over Spence, been a lot of attention, a lot of pub about a proposed fight between Crawford and Canelo. Crawford, of course, has said he's willing to move up to 168 to make that fight happen. We will see if that's the reality or not. Canelo, this is the second fight of a 3-fight deal with PBC. What's up next for the Mexican superstar?
After the fight, Canelo made it 100% clear that Crawford is not his next opponent. Not at all his next opponent. Benavidez, Canelo is going to keep him at arm's length, I think, as long as he can. I think the logical fight is the one we all expected 4 months ago. And now there's a little drama to add to it, which is Jermall Charlo. He's under the PBC banner. He's closer in weight, in theory, right? And now we have the added storyline of Jermall stepping in to avenge the family name. And I think that's what we're going to see because, Charlo's, Canelo is not going to be forced by any sanctioning body to fight a mandatory. He's always going to get a concession. So he's going to get to pick and choose. So I'm sure once he's had a few weeks off to enjoy himself, they'll start talking and bring in Mr. Heyman and figure it out. As for Jermell, I'm not sure I know who his mandatories are for his remaining belts. That's what he needs to do next. And he needs to take the least threatening mandatory challenger, whoever it is, off pay-per-view, get his confidence back. That's what it's going to be intended for. And then he can think seriously about another fight. But right now, Tim Tszyu crushes him. crushes his spirit and then crushes him physically, because he is willing, like Wilder and others, to go out on his shield, like his countryman, Jaya Pataya, go out on your shield. So I think that we'll see, essentially a tune-up fight as a mandatory defense for Jermell, and then we'll see from there. But I do think Canelo's next opponent will be Jermall Charlo.
I talk about my disgust in terms of Charlo's performance. Um, I don't know if it's hyperbole on this part, but it's matched, Miguel, by the decision of a fight on the undercard here, and that was the result of the fight between Erickson Lubin and Jesus Ramos. Another boring fight. Like Charlo, Lubin didn't put much of a concerted effort at all, in my opinion, and yet he walked away with not just a decision, but a unanimous decision by rather comfortable margin. Uh, I felt that Ramos won, and what was even more appalling to me was not just Lubin's performance, but also his comments after the fight, basically saying that he deserved to be amongst the elite at 154 pounds. Really, sir? After that kind of performance? Who do you think you're fooling? Just because you was lucky to get a decision, don't let it get over. Don't get the big head and walk around and saying that kind of output all of a sudden makes you at the very top at 154. I strongly disagree.
Listen, that fight had a script, and they needed to follow the script. Forget the eye test. Forget what we all saw. Forget what CopyBox measured, which was Ramos outlanding Lubin 145-92. Do the math. 50% more punches landed in the fight by Ramos than by Lubin. That thing was as scripted as Monday Night Raw. Seriously. I mean, come on. But the narrative is already put together. Lubin, is the guy that they want to feature, put in the next fight, and that's the deal. All I can hope is that somewhere behind the scenes, Ramos was told, "Listen, we'll take care of you. We'll do right by you down the road." Which does happen. I mean, we see that happen all the time. But even the crowd, which normally isn't too invested, frankly, in the undercard fights, they made themselves heard loud and clear. They knew Ramos had won that fight. But forever in BoxRec, it's going to show Lubin as the winner. Lubin can hold himself out as the winner. On paper, he's the winner. Officially, he's the winner. It's unfortunate because it really puts a black mark on a fighter's career. He can say, well, I don't have the loss on my record, but the fans have this fight as a loss in their minds. And I think that's a lot worse sometimes.
Let's move past those two disappointing fights and go to what was arguably the fight of the evening, Daniel. That was the first fight on the pay-per-view card between Yordenis Ugas making his return to the ring for the first time following his stoppage loss to Errol Spence well over a year ago. Fought Mario Barrios, who many fans remember, for his stoppage loss to Tank Davis a few years back. And I got to give it up to Barrios. He ended up winning by decision, put Ugas down a couple of times. And for me, could you make a case that given who he was in the ring with, was this the best performance of Barrios' career? Because The jab was terrific. I was surprised that he won the battle of the left jabs with Ugas. Ugas seemed to show his age in there, but I don't want to take away from Barrios, who, as the rounds as the rounds went on, he began to show his dominance, particularly from midpoint of the fight on. Ugas couldn't keep up with the pace. Mario did a good job of landing, not only continuing to be effective with the jab, but also following up with hard shots to the head and body over the last half of the fight. Really punished Yordenis Ugas on the way to a decisive win.
Yeah, this was a good methodical win by Barrios, which he's always been. He's always been a good sound fighter in that sense. He's kind of a little bit in the Danny Garcia mode where he won't do one thing spectacularly, but he'll do everything well. And it showed in this fight. Now, granted, we know that this is an Ugas who hasn't, his best days have been behind him, but at the same time, this is another also situation where he fought too brave for his own good. That eye was swollen shut twice. And I got to look at his corner and just assume, like, okay, did he tell you he was not going to stop? Because that's your job. You have to stop him. And ultimately, that's going to be probably the deciding factor into it because at this stage, because of what was on the line, he's technically one of the semi-mandatories for Terrence Crawford right now. That did gain him that good amount, and because of the win, because of who he's fought against, people are already touting that this retroactively makes Tank's victory over Barrios that much better. I disagree with that, but it's still a good showing. I don't think he's going to do that much more at welterweight, considering who he's fought. Because think about it, if PBC tries to put him against Bud, that's a lamb to the slaughter. So we'll see how it shapes up. But it's a good win for Mario, and for Ugas, he's fought fairly. Like I said, he's had a decent career. He's fought fairly well. He has been a champion, but his best days are clearly behind him. And at this point, he's either going to be a gatekeeper for up and comers, or he can retire, just remove the health because that eye, like I said, that eye just looks so bad. And at a certain point, you can't recover from those type of shots, and your body can't either.
Right, 38 years old, coming off of a lengthy layoff, and it seemed that that Spence uh, did some kind of lasting damage to that right eye because I believe there was an eye that he suffered the fractured or broken orbital bone, and it swelled up again in this fight against Barrios. And if it doesn't make any sense given how he fought and given the beating that he took over large segments of this fight. In my opinion, my humble opinion, I think it's time for Ugas to contemplate, calling it a day. Those fights happened at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas earlier in the day, Gail, at Wembley Arena in London. On the zone, you had the long awaited first title defense of IBF cruiserweight champion Jai Opatai fought a local British fighter, Jordan Thompson. Both of them look huge for cruiserweights, particularly Thompson at 6'6". He weighed 198 and a half, but he looked like a full-fledged heavyweight in there. And Opatai is no slouch either. He's 6'3", 6'4". So two giants fighters for that division. And my thoughts afterwards is that Opatai looks to be the real deal. Took control of this fight early, basically showed everything in as he punished and pummeled Thompson on the way to a third round stoppage. Uh, the power is there. He's a good boxer, speed. He even showed a good chin, Gail, because in round three, Thompson, who has a reputation for having power, caught Opatai clean with his best shot, right hand right down the middle, and Opatai ate it up like Pac-Man and returned fire and ended up hurting Thompson on the way to the ultimately ending matters. Yeah, maybe a little bit presumptuous on my part, but Opatai is making a strong case after one single fight that he may be the best in the division. Very, very impressive performance on his part.
Very impressive, entertaining. He's fun to watch. Nobody griped that they got shortchanged by going home early after 4 rounds. And honestly, as hard as Opataya dropped Thompson in the first round, I was surprised to see Thompson make it to the second round, let alone the third. And honestly, at that point, his corner should have waved it off. He gamely came out for that fourth round and he only lasted another 20 seconds because Opataya didn't hesitate to go after him. And that's no small thing when you've suffered a potentially career-ending injury as he did in the war he had with Marius Briedis, which was 17 months ago. So, there were concerns about ring rust, first of all. Second, he suffered the kind of injury that's really rare. Fighters do break a jaw from time to time, and that's where they're getting hit. It's understandable. Oscar Valdez is very famously, known for fighting through a broken jaw, which he essentially held in place with his gum shield and his congealed bleeding inside the mouth. It's just kind of freaky when you think about it. But Opataya's jaw was broken on both sides. It was essentially hanging from his face by the end of the fight, to the point he couldn't do a post-fight interview after having won the titles and the lineal championship. He couldn't speak. He physically could not say anything, which is amazing. So he has come through healing from that injury. And here he is testing himself in the ring. And he passed that test with flying colors. He is a power puncher, with a capital P twice. He is very mobile. He gave up 5 inches in height to Thompson, but it didn't matter. Thompson had said in the lead up to the fight, which he did take on somewhat short notice, that he, be able to use his height and that he could handle Opataya. Opataya showed zero fear of him. After taking a few shots, he showed zero respect for him and just moved right in on him. And he used angles nicely to get to him. The question was going to be, when you've got a southpaw versus an orthodox fighter, is the position of the feet. Opataya won that and then some. Just stepped right over him. Just walked right over him. It was an exciting return. We remembered why we were so enthused about him after he beat up Briedis in that crazy fight. It's just a shame that all that enthusiasm had to die down while we waited for him to come back. But he resurrected that in fine style. He wants to take on the other belt holders. Briedis was also ringside. Mentioned a rematch, but he also mentioned going after the younger cruiserweight that was on the undercard, Siobhan Clark, who also looks to be livening up this division. Had a very good all-action fight that went all 10 rounds in his case. And there's Badu Jack walking around out there. There's just a lot of interesting options. And as we get into the preview, we're going to have another cruiserweight fight with 2 names much better known here in the United States. And should I say it? Cruiserweight's suddenly becoming an interesting, exciting division? I think it might be true, and it's about damn time.
You mentioned those future opponents, but the main guy that he was talking about immediately after the fight was he wants a unification fight with Chris Billum Smith, who's WBO champion. Not only do I like Opatai in terms of how he fights, his style, very complete, great blend of speed, skill, and power. But he got that edge to him, right? He seems to be one of these type of fighters who's generally respectful for his opponents and whatever. But when he's in boxing mode, he means business, and he has that kind of Bud Crawford like edge to him. Dare I say? Don't mess with him. Don't walk up on him, and you could see it not only in the fight in the way that he, to your point, Gail, showed Thompson no respect, and you also saw it in the post fight with him and his kind of business partner, if you will, Eddie Hearn. For those who may not know, Opatai is handled by Australian outfit called Tasman Fighters. And before this fight, Tasman Fighters signed a television rights deal with Matchroom. So as long as Opatai fights, specifically as long as he defends the belts, those title defenses will be on would be on the zone and associated with Matchroom Boxing, right? So during the post-fight interviews, both in the ring and out of the ring, Opatai, he wasn't afraid to push back against Hearn and did so in his face to the cameras, saying that he wants to make his future in Australia, that he wants a fight with Billum Smith. I like that as a fighter. I'm gravitated to guys who are not afraid to speak their mind, and they back it up with their fists in the ring. So yeah, a lot of positives here with Opatai, and in the way he performed, the way he fought, you definitely want to see him again. Didn't have a show last week, so I want to. No, I think we did talk about this fight, Zhilei Zhang and Joyce, last week. Correct me if I'm wrong.
We did. We actually did.
Yes, right. So let's move on to the news here, and I'm gonna purposely go to Daniel with this first bit of news. And that is, of course, the big news of the past week was that a deal has been struck between heavyweight champions Oleksandr Usyk and one Tyson Fury. What's in play, Daniel, is that if Fury is not unscathed from his, technically it's not an exhibition, but I call it an exhibition with the MMA star Ngannou towards the end of this month, he's going to fight Usyk next. It could happen as early as December 23rd or in January of 2024 in Saudi Arabia. For the longest time, you've been skeptical. You've had your cynicism. You've been cynical, of this proposed fight, and to the point that I agree with you. A lot of your cynicism, right? Because as the months went along throughout 2023, the perception was that Fury was hesitant about fighting Usyk. What pops in your head now that these two have quote unquote agreed to a deal?
One, that the paper revives for the Ngannou fight ain't looking that hot then, because now you're trying to entice and bait customers and saying, hey, no, you need to buy this fight, because if Fury wins, he'll fight the guy that he's put every single obstacle with not to fight against, and he'll do it this time. No, come on. Let's stop capping here. Fury is going to find a way to bullshit his way out of this deal, because it's not a deal. Logically, it does not make sense. It does not make sense at this stage, at his age, for Fury to essentially take another fight at 3 days' notice, and immediately 3 months afterwards. Because, and even then, the only way it makes any logical sense is if he gets an immediate first round knockout in the first 10 seconds. Which, if you've seen Francis Ngannou fight in the UFC, that's likely not going to happen because he's very, very guarded. So that's going to be a situation where they're going to do it. They're going to try to say terms, and then Fury's team is going to pull something out of their ass, and then suddenly, we signed the things, but we never really agreed on the date. We never agreed on the venue. The split wasn't right, and we'll just move on. We'll move on, and maybe, who knows? Hey, we talked about the fight with Zhilei Zhang, and we know that he called out Fury afterwards. Maybe that's an interesting fight to do it in. I don't think he'll do it, but then what do you do next? Because right now, unfortunately, when it comes to Fury, all you really have is name notoriety in the UK and the belt. At some point, Mauricio is going to outweigh that and say, like, you know what? I'd rather have I already have helped make undisputed champions so much in a way, and I'd rather have that with Usyk than dealing with this in and out. So, like I said, I'm not buying 1 second of this.
Do you agree, Gail, with Daniel's skepticism in his belief that, yeah, they technically put it out there that they agreed to a deal, but you'll believe it when you see it?
Yes, indeed. I do agree with them. It's kind of like that friend that says to you, "Oh, I'm engaged. I'm engaged." There's no ring and there's no date. All right? Till I see the ring, till there's a date for the wedding, it's all talk. And there's no date, and that means there's no boxing ring. Until we know that there's a date and a venue, a lot of things go wrong in between. We've agreed to fight and we've signed for a specific date and venue. So let's see what happens. What may happen is if they screw around anymore, Fury, if Fury wants to go for the money grab and the stunt fights, listen, he's entitled. He does have the ability to make, generational wealth with some of these crazy fights like his matchup with Ngannou. If their venue's willing to stage them and people willing to pay, listen, I don't love it, but I don't begrudge him going that direction. But he needs to be honest about it. He needs to give up his belt and let Usyk fight for it. Usyk wants to be undisputed, but once that happens, I think he's done. So we need to have all that take place. And then let's move on to the next generation of heavyweights. And maybe some of these exciting cruiserweights move up just a little bit. Let's see these belts go back out there and be reseeded into the division. It is often said, and I believe it is somewhat true, perhaps not completely, but partially true, that as the health of the heavyweight division goes, so goes boxing, because that is where casual fans' eyes are drawn.
We'll keep you updated on the situation, whether this deal is real or not, or when if there's a proposed date for this particular fight. We'll keep you abreast of all things regarding the still developing story. First fight we talked about in the recap was Jermall Charlo moving up to fight Canelo. During our discussion, Mel's twin brother Jermall Charlo's name was mentioned. I believe it was mentioned by you, Gil. I go to you in terms of this next bit of news. In terms of Jermall Charlo, who's after 2+ year layoff, news leaked that he's finally getting ready to return to the ring fighting Jose Benavidez Jr., brother of David Benavidez, on November 25th. I'm sorry. When I heard the news, I first didn't believe it. I eventually found out it was true. Wrote about for 3kingsboxing.com. Please check out 3kingsboxing.com, your source for pure unadulterated boxing information. Shout out to the entire 3 Kings Boxing staff and crew. 2K, the head man behind 3KB, Bo, who you've heard on this show numerous times. Senior writer, head of media relations. You have Bakari, senior writer. You have yours truly, a senior writer for 3 Kings Boxing. Red, who does a lot of the work, who is our editor behind the scenes, and all the contributors as well behind the scenes. This fight is going to happen on the undercard of David Benavidez and Bubu Andrade. Am I wrong for not wanting this fight to happen? Because I know Mel has been out of the ring for 2+ years, but Jose Benavidez, a guy who's been basically a 140, 147 pounder for the majority of his career, lost not too long ago. Is that the best they could do when it comes to a comeback fight for Charlo?
Apparently it is. You know what? It's not a box wreck yet. I will say that. Jose Jr. has fought at super welterweight since 2021. He moved up after he got creamed by Terrence Crawford. So it's not the biggest jump, but listen, I will at least give the promoters credit for not making it a main event fight. He's been put on the undercard. I do understand that he needs to have a tune-up fight. And I imagine that this was tossed in as a sweetener for his much more prominent brother, David, to take the fight with Bubu Andrade, to say, listen, we'll also give your brother, a spot on the undercard. Did it need to be against Jermall? God, I think that it could have been something else for Jose, but that's where we are. And, we're just going to have to hold our nose, let him get it over with, right? It's like a dose of some really bad tasting medicine, but I get it. A tune-up fight needs to happen. This way they don't have to pay him a whole lot for it. You're burying it on the Benavidez card. And again, they could create a storyline that both the Benavidez brothers are on the card, and fighting, these two fighters, Andrade and Charlo, who do, share a fan base somewhat. So I see why they did it. I don't have to love it. However, if Charlo doesn't absolutely go through him like a knife through butter, we got a problem.
If he doesn't walk through this dude, I agree with you. It is a problem. Put out a comment here from Beagle47, who's listening to us live. Appreciate you. If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that like button and that subscribe button. Help the overall algorithms and get us closer to being to monetization status. Beagle says lamb to slaughter.
Mutton on
Pretty
the grill,
much,
man.
yeah.
Mutton stew all day, every day.
But if he doesn't take care of business rather easily against a significantly smaller man, because let's face it, Jermall Charlo at this point of his career is more of a super middleweight than he is a real at a middleweight. So he should win this rather easily. If he loses, call it a day. He doesn't need to fight anymore. Given the layoff and given the personal issues that he's had in these past 2+ years, to me, that just says that he's just lost it, and he doesn't have much left. And I ain't talking about from a physical perspective. I'm talking about from a mental and psychological perspective. We'll see where this goes from here. He could be in the Canelo sweepstakes with an impressive performance. Could fight Caleb Plant as well. We know the dust up that they had a couple of months ago. So we will see where this goes. We will see how Maul, looks in his comeback fight. Um, Ryan Garcia news here, Daniel, is that um, during an interview on ESPN, Oscar De La Hoya announced that he's going to face. He's making his return to the ring on December 2nd, against Oscar Duarte. Duarte, won his last 11 fights by stoppage, but it's been a guy that against guys that most of us do not know much about. So to me, his despite the impressive knockout streak, his list of opponents is a little bit suspect. Garcia's campaigning at 140 now, right? Um, Under the guidance of Derek James. We all know he's coming off of the stoppage loss to Tank in April. What improvements do you think that James could make when it comes to the when it comes to Garcia?
The main improvements that he can make is just variation of his offense mainly, because we know when it comes to Ryan, his main weapons are his hand speed and the left hook. But that unfortunately is the playbook that every opponent can use against him. Tank actually used it pretty well until like the later rounds, and it took him knocking him out. Luckily for Ryan not to come back. So he needs that a variation in offense. Defense is gonna be that's gonna be an interesting story because I do wonder, particularly after these two losses, that his camp has suffered. Obviously, Spence just being completely and utterly taken apart by Terrence Crawford, and Canelo essentially toying with Mel after he decided that he couldn't hurt him. Would you focus more on being a little bit more defensive minded? Even though, yeah, like you mentioned, despite the resume, it's still 11 knockouts. That's still a pretty decent streak coming into it. And we'll also say this: these knockouts have not come normally in the Berlanga fashion. I'll say when it comes to Duarte, but does that quality of fighter make Ryan's camp think, okay, he's not really that good? We don't have to worry about it, or did they get overcautious and say, like, you know what, we need to really focus on our defense. You can put your variables in and then see what comes out of it. That's probably the main things that Derek James has to work with, because obviously he's become the go-to trainer for a lot of these guys. Him to Ryan went in with him, Anthony Joshua's with him now. So there are situations where it really behooves his camp to get a victory. Because if you don't, if it's a situation where you now have three marquee fighters lose in a row, one, like I said, one by decimation, the other one by essentially pity. And if Ryan loses, if he loses by knockout, that's really, really black mark on Derrick James, and that's when the pressure's starting to come into him. So I probably would say variation of offense, but more than likely, they're probably going to lean more towards what they're going to do on defense.
We will see, because as you noted, after being named by many boxing publications as the trainer of the year, Derek James is on a bit of a bad streak. So we will. Does this ruin his quote unquote reputation? No, but I think for his sake, moving forward, with rumors out there that Spence could possibly be wanting to separate from him when it comes to the rest of his career. Um, it's important that when it comes to Garcia in his next fight, that we see some improvements, that we see a more well-rounded out fighter, that we see a guy who relies more on the left hook, because let's face it, coming off of the Joshua fight, where Joshua didn't look that hot until he landed that one shot to end matters. Yeah, yeah. From a trainer perspective, there's a lot to be desired right now when it comes to Derek James, and you hope that again with Garcia, you see something there. Should he should win this fight, in my opinion, because in viewing Duarte's record and watch some of him on film, Ryan is too fast and he's too big. Even though Ryan is full time moving up at 140, Duarte is most of his career at 135. One look at Garcia, yeah, you can tell he's a big dude for that weight, and I think he will win, could possibly win by stoppage. Let's move on here to preview some fights. And November 7th coming up is looking to be one of the busiest days of 2023, loaded down with fights. So many that I couldn't put all of them in the docket because we would be here for another 30, 45 minutes just previewing fights, right? So let's get things going. And so many fights here. I'm going to split these fights up. Going to you, Gail. Last time we saw Zurdo Ramirez, easily he was outboxed by Dimitri Bivol. Returning to the ring, fighting Joe Smith, and to me is a crossroads bout. A lot of people remember Joe Smith for getting blitzed by Bermudez in 2 rounds. To me, whoever wins this fight is still near the top of the heap at 175 pounds. Whoever loses this fight, Gil, has a lot of thinking to do. Power of Joe Smith versus the size of Zurdo Ramirez, who when he's on his game, throws a lot of punches, particularly to the body. But when he's off his game, or when he lets himself get out of control when it comes to discipline in his weight, he doesn't look good. Who do you think has the advantages in this fight? It's a matchup to me that I can't quite call. In terms of winning.
It's a tough one. I did a preview for nyfights.com today. It's now posted if you'd like to get more details than we can discuss here on the show. First of all, Zurdo had a return fight planned against Gabe Rosado. Remember that one, everybody? The one that came in 12 pounds overweight. He didn't even get on the scale.
That boxing fans would have such a visceral reaction. They just basically called the fight off.
They did. Well, no, they called it off. 12 pounds. The problem was, here's Gabe Rosado, God bless him, somewhat of a blown up super middleweight, being asked to go light heavyweight. Seriously? Against Zurdo, who can barely make 175 and blew right through it, right up to 183, or by some rumors 187 if you heard it. So that's the reason for the delay in his return. As for Joe Smith, yeah, he took an absolute beating in 2 rounds from Artur Beterbiev, who absolutely crushed Joe Smith. Something that we were all frankly surprised to see. Not so shocked that Beterbiev won, but the manner in which he won, the dominating swift end to Smith. He was demoralized, and he really did contemplate retiring. He has always been an overachiever, given his background and skills. He's been very smart about his money. He's from Daniel's neck of the woods, but he started thinking a little bit about coming back, and what really fueled him toward a return was the murder of his brother in late May, in a domestic violence fueled murder, as it turned out. And I think after he got over the shock, which was awful on the whole family, decided, listen, life is short and life is not guaranteed. And I'm not done yet. I'm not done. So what's interesting is neither of them is going to fight at light heavyweight anymore. They're going to cruiserweight. This is a cruiserweight fight. Now, there is an artificial weight limit. It's a non-title fight. So they agreed to a 193 weight limit. I am very interested to see how this plays out.
Wait a minute, did you say 193?
193. This is a cruiserweight fight.
Oh
Neither of them are fighting at light heavyweight. No, it's a cruiserweight fight. Zurdo finally wised up, and he is going to campaign full-time at cruiserweight. He's made that very clear. He's done with light heavyweight. So Smith agreed to come up. They agreed to slightly lowering the upper weight limit. Joe isn't a small light heavyweight, but he's always fought extremely lean. He's got those stringy, hard muscles that you get from years and years of hard physical work. As I think most people know his story. He's been a union laborer most of his life. And even after he began boxing professionally, kept working. And then he and his father started a arborist company, tree company. And he still chops the tree down every now and then. So, he's got that sort of build. So he's big enough to take on more weight, but Zurdo will definitely be the bigger fighter. Here's the big question in my mind. Is this going to fire Zurdo back up? Have we been watching for maybe years a dangerously weight-drained Zurdo? And that's why he's performed so poorly? Maybe we're going to find out. If he finally has a training camp that's not a fat camp, what's he going to look like? And how is he going to handle Joe Smith? Because Zurdo, we all forget how skilled he was in the early days of his career and going back to super middleweight. He always had the speed, the footwork. Very athletic. He's just a very athletic individual. That all got lost with the weight issues. And then he had contractual squabbles too with Top Rank, and he was out of the ring for a little while. So here he is back. Smith has always made the most of his skills. He's a power puncher. He's a pressure fighter. He is not afraid to walk straight into the fire, and that's what got him in trouble with Artur Beterbiev. But listen, Zurdo hits hard, but he doesn't hit like Beterbiev. And if Joe can put enough pressure on Zurdo and come at him and cut off the ring, we could have a very interesting fight on our hands. Smith has taken down some very skilled fighters, right? And he has that right hook, the eraser hand that a lot of fighters have. And he does very well against technically oriented southpaws. He crushed Andre Fonfara, which was very unexpected. And he also crushed Bernard Hopkins. Let us remember, that was supposed to be Hopkins, glory walk off into retirement. And Smith ruined it. So I'm intrigued by this fight. Smith is very emotional about this fight being dedicated to his brother. If Smith Jr. won, it'd be like the script of a movie. So I will have my eyes on this fight, and it's on DAZN, and it's not a pay-per-view unless you are a DAZN subscriber. You could do worse than pay that 1 month of DAZN to see this fight.
Yeah, if styles make fights, these two fighters, given the fact that neither one likes to move backwards, both guys have pop. Let's see what kind of pop they will carry at the higher weight. But yeah, both are going to be right there in each other's faces. Both can hit and be hit. So those are the ingredients of, at the very least, those are the ingredients of a fairly entertaining matchup. And to your point, Gail, yes, that fight will be on DAZN, and those two are fighting in Las Vegas. Over in Canada, Daniel, women's unification bout, right? At 108 pounds, Evelin Bermudez. Evelin Bermudez is the unified champion at 108 pounds. One of the best fighters in women's boxing overall, in my opinion. Her close loss to Yocosta Valier last year, November, was a fantastic battle. Um, Bermudez is fighting Kim Clavel herself, a former champion. Bermudez traveling from her home country in Australia to fight in Canada against Clavel. What did you make of this matchup? Bermudez, I give Evelin Bermudez the advantage here, but at the same time, I think Clavel, if she's on it and if she can deal with the height and the reach of Bermudez, has the work rate and fights with the fire that she can give Bermudez some problems here.
This is going to be interesting into it because, yeah, Clavel does have a really decent work rate and she does have the home ring advantage at being in Canada. But Bermudez, Bermudez wants, even if it's doing 3 pounds, she may want another crack of Valle. And in many ways, like we've seen in a lot of women's fights lately, this is pretty much probably a dress rehearsal towards that. Either Valle or maybe try to even get into the ring with Superbad. If she wins that fight with Valle, we have to see. Because obviously she's going to the road, but I do think her height and her power is probably going to make sure to pull it through. I do think Clavicle is going to give her a much better fight than what a lot of people think that she's going to wind up getting.
Going back to you, Daniel, to talk about a couple of fights over in Japan, I'm going to give you the option of no. What I will do is this. The Shigeoka brothers, right? Japanese fighters at 105 pounds, getting title shots fighting on the same card. Um, Ginjiro, the more known for boxing hardcore heads, the younger of the Shigeoka brothers, he's fighting a rematch against Daniel Valladares, who was IBF champion at 105 pounds. The older Shigeoka brother, Yudai, is fighting Panya Pradabsri. Uh, I can talk about the Shigeoka Ginjiro one first. Uh, Ginjiro versus Valladares. They fought earlier this year in January, right? And for me, Ginjiro was on the way, in my opinion, to a clear win when an accidental clash of heads damaged Valladares to the point that he could not continue. Shigeoka has since scored a ninth round stoppage over former world champion, former minimum weight champion Rene Quattro. And of course, him and Valladares, Shigeoka and Valladares are fighting again on the 7th of October. I might have said November earlier. My apologies. October 7th. It's chock full of boxing. My apologies on that. But they're going to fight in Tokyo, right? And I just think personally that the speed and explosiveness of Shigeoka, he's going to finish what he was on his way to doing in that first fight. He's going to finish that in the rematch. Ginjiro is not the tallest in the world, particularly even at 105 pounds. He's only around 5 foot, 5'1" at the most. But I get kind of Chiquita Gonzalez vibes with him, except he has more movement. I mentioned Chiquita because of the left-handed power that Ginjiro has. Very, very explosive for such a small man. Very, very fast for such a small man. And I think that dynamic aspect to his game will be too much this time for a Valladares who's tough, but who can be hit. And I think he can be hurt. And I think Ginjiro Shigeoka is going to hurt him. And he's going to stop him in this rematch and win the IBF title. On the quote unquote main event, Daniel, you have the older brother, Yudai, fighting a guy in Pradabsri. No offense to your guy, knockout CP Freshmar, but to me, I think Pradabsri is the best at 105 pounds. Very interesting matchup. Both guys can box Both guys are active. Guys have a little bit of pop in their punch. But to me, I think there's levels to this. For me, and I think that Pradabsri, the WBC champion at minimum weight, I think he's a level above the older Shigeoka brother. Your thoughts on this on that upcoming fight?
You had to bring bring the not the my boy fresh for it, man. That one hurt. That one hurt. But you know what? This is an interesting dynamic that we see, where particularly brothers. Now we talked about the Benavidez brothers earlier in the day, where the younger brother tends to be the one that's a little bit more polished, is a little bit faster, probably has a little bit more punching power. That looks to be the case in this one because, like you mentioned it, I can't pronounce the Thai fighter's name. Unfortunately, I cannot do it for the life of me. But yeah, he is very, very warranted in getting that fight. And unfortunately, in that area, this is a dress rehearsal because while Bigger Brother is getting the stage on it, we know the audience is actually. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic. How
You
they
went out
structure
on me, Daniel. Could you repeat what you said, please?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like I got some text. No, the main thing would be is that this is going to be an interesting fight because it's a fight where you see the co-main event probably be more focused into this because if Thai fighter wins, more than likely that's a good fight to have with little brother. So, and we know sometimes with brothers, the older one does not like it. Sometimes when the bigger brother, when the little brother gets a little bit more of the love. So this is going to be an interesting fight. I don't expect it to go to the cards. These guys are going to crack, to me, and it's going to be a very interesting fight indeed.
Let's move from Tokyo and that in the Shigeoka brothers, Gail, to Manchester on the card on the zone. The zone is going to be very, very busy on the afternoon and evening of October 7th. Um,
Michael, you have muted yourself.
I thought it was my cell phone for a little bit.
you know,
Yes, you were on mute there. You're going to need to start the segment over.
yeah, my quick.
Sounds like Mike unfortunately having technical difficulties.
So let's carry on, Daniel, like we always do. I assume we're going over to the Wood Warrington Harper Brickus.
No.
Yes. Are you
Okay,
back?
my apologies. Yeah, I'm back. I'm back. Let me start over again. My apologies for the technical issues on my end. Um, over in Manchester evening on the zone, I was mentioning that the zone is going to have a busy afternoon and evening on October 7th. Terri Harper, like Natasha Jonas, she made the trek up from 130, 135 up to 154, right? With success. Harper ends up winning a belt like Jonas at 154 pounds. WBC version, excuse me, yeah, WBA version, my apologies. And she's going to fight Cecilia Brackers, who was a long time undisputed champion at 147 pounds. These two ladies were supposed to fight earlier this summer. It got canceled when Brackers pulled out really hours before the weigh-in because she fell ill. These two ladies are going to fight for not just Harper's WBA belt, but for the vacant WBO belt at 154 pounds, as well as Natasha Jonas, elected to vacate that WBO title at 154 pounds. Breakers is the older fighter. She's the more experienced fighter. but I think she's the smaller fighter, even though she's campaigned most of her career at 147, while Harper has fought most of her career at 130 and 135, right? If you remember, if you see, for those who saw Harper when she won the belt, um, and her body has acclimated very, very well to the higher weight. It just says to me, Gil, that she was malnourished all of those years fighting at the lower weight, and she's more of a 154 pounder. She really hurt herself from a physical standpoint fighting at the lower weight. I think that because she's younger, I think that because she's physically stronger, she's going to be too much for the older Brackus. The Brackus has all of a sudden finds the fountain of youth, and it's the fighter of that she was 5, 10 years ago. She has a shot to win. But given how Brackus has looked in her last few outings, I think that Terri Harper has the definite advantage going in.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Cecilia Braekhus came up in an era where, we were sort of between the Christy Martin era and Wolf era of women's boxing. And then we had this real drought for a long time. And finally, professional boxing has had a complete renaissance and is now becoming much more well established. Braekhus was the sort of the bridge between these two worlds, and it's kind of unfortunate that she wasn't born 10 or 15 years later, because she'd be a superstar. And she just, her timing missed that. She wants to go out with a win, but she hasn't been able to do it. I wish she'd call it a career. She's a first ballot Hall of Famer, guaranteed. She's a pioneer. There's a lot of leadership roles and other roles she could fulfill in boxing, should she want to. But damn it, some boxers, men and women, they just can't leave it. So I get it. And she, she's given herself a big challenge, but I agree with you. Youth is going to prevail. This is a very big hill for Braekhus to climb. I hope that if she does lose, whether narrowly or badly, that she calls it a career. And I do think we're going to see a loss.
This fight is happening on the undercard of Lee Wood defending his WBA 126-pound title against Josh Warrington Daniel. From a local perspective, I get why it's happening, because Warrington is a big name still in the UK, and it is a significant fight over there. However, I question why Warrington is getting in this fight. I question if he really is deserving of this fight. He lost his IBF belt the last time in his last bout against Luis Alberto Lopez. Warrington hasn't looked good in a while. He has not been the same fighter since Mauricio Lara blitzed him, right? In 2021. That first fight in the spring of 2021. Was on his way to losing that rematch. And yes, he beat Kiko Martinez to become, two-time IBF champion. But the truth showed when it comes to Lara in that fight against Alberto Lopez. He's facing a Lee Wood who's coming off of the rematch win against a Lara. All things being fair, Warrington is the more active fighter, but just like I questioned beforehand if Canelo still had the pepper, I question if Josh Warrington has the pepper, Daniel. I question whether he's really fully recovered from a mental and psychological standpoint from that beatdown that he suffered against Mauricio Lara. I think that Josh Warrington is a dude who still has demons in his head, and if he gets hit hard, and Lee Wood can crack, right? He's shown that he's had power, particularly in the right hand. Uh, um, I think he will cause Warrington to revisit those ghosts. I make Lee Wood the favorite here. I don't know. I don't know if Josh Warrington at this stage of his career has it in him to win this kind of fight.
Yeah, this when this fight was made, it did scratch my head when it happened because from a domestic standpoint, I understand it. It's a big fight within the UK, but at the same time, you look into the trajectory of each fighter. Like I said, mentioned Warrington. Effectively, Mauricio Lara still has his soul, or at least half of his soul, with him, and he may be waiting to collect the second half fairly soon. That's one area where Warrington has not really looked the same. And like I said, you basically, yeah, you gotta win. You got your second title off of beating a Kiko Martinez, who some like I said, who got lucky to even get to that point, and that point of his career. And now you have somebody like in Lee Wood who has a lot of confidence. Like I said, he beat Mike Conlon out of the ring. And then, like I said, thinking that he probably wouldn't. Not a lot of people had him. I didn't. I look at him at that. I didn't. Like he beat pretty well Mauricio Lara. So he's coming off a pretty decent hot streak. And to like I said, and taking the domestic avenues out of it, it doesn't make much sense to put a fighter that clearly is on the downs. It's probably on the downside of career versus somebody that's starting to really get hot in the division that really needs somebody to start dominating fairly soon. It's perplexing in a way to see how this fight is going to go. I think Lee Wood's going to take this one because like he hasn't experienced the loss that Warrington has, and he does have the mental advantage of I beat the guy that took your soul. So there's always that advantage. So I predict, like I said, Lee Wood's probably going to be the one that comes out of this and is going to be fared a little bit better. And maybe, like I said, this will be Warrington's swan song, or maybe they'll give him a fairly decent goodbye fight afterwards. But like I said, this clearly looks like a mismatch at this point. And outside of a Warrington miracle win, I don't see any result other than the Lee Wood victory.
I agree. And I think we're going to shut things down on that note. I want to thank everybody who joined us, or who have checked us out live. Well, not who checked us out on YouTube. Shout out to Beagle47 for his comments in the chat. Going to begin the show with ladies first. Oh, let me say that beforehand. If you haven't already, if you're checking us out on YouTube, please make sure you hit that like button. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button. To do so will help the overall algorithm behind the scenes and get us closer to being monetized. We begin the show with ladies first. End the show with ladies first. Gail from nyfights.com for those who want to talk all things boxing. Let the folks know where they can find you.
That's the place, nyfights.com. And I'm going to add 30 seconds to the show to note the victory, bit of a surprising victory by Otto Wallin over Murat Gassiev.
That's right.
Which was held in
Thank
a big casino resort on the Mediterranean Sea in Turkey. Go figure, right? Was not available on North American television. But folks, if you were following me on X, the stream was available through RU Sport, which is kind of the Russian ESPN. A very, very good stream, as long as you were okay listening to the Russian commentary. Wallin fought a very disciplined, active fight. Jab, jab, jab. Gassiev could never get warmed up. Wallin was defensively responsible, avoided getting cracked. But a lot of the rounds were close, and I thought, damn it, Valin's going to get robbed on the cards because that Turkey isn't Russia, but, come on. And Wallin won by split decision. So, folks, watch for him at a venue near you.
And kudos to Wallin. His only loss of his career was to one Tyson Fury. He's ranked by two of the sanctioning bodies. I believe this fight was an IBF eliminator. So the win puts him closer to being what he hopes is a world title shot in 2024. And once again, for those who missed it, for those who want to talk all things boxing with Gail, you can please go to nyfights.com, or you can check her out on Twitter at PRPro San Diego. I'll go to you, Daniel. For those who want to talk all things boxing, for those who want to talk all things professional wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially the Miami Heat, and please give me an explanation for that hairstyle from Jimmy Butler today at the press conference. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Okay, as far as Jimmy, it has become a tradition for Jimmy to sport essentially a Halloween costume in many ways.
I got questions, man.
But okay, this for this one, it's mainly fueled because of the whole Damian Lillard situation, where basically, if people don't, unless people have been living under a bridge that don't listen to NBA, Damian Lillard told the Portland Trailblazers he wanted to be traded to the Miami Heat, but the way that he did it made Joe Cronin, the GM of the Blazers, make the decision to not trade him to the Heat under any circumstance. And he achieved that. And objectively looking, he got a pretty decent deal. He got a pretty decent deal out of it when you take into account what he's getting for Drew Holiday. But that put him in the stage where Jimmy's going to be at least for a day as I'm honoring member of My Chemical Romance fan club. But we'll leave that in that area. Folks, like I said, you can just watch everything on Twitter. Like I said, I'm not calling it X because, folks, it's going to go back to Twitter as soon as Elon sells this thing for scraps. So it's going to go back to Twitter. And just like catch me out there, Roxanne RWKUZ 99.
Again, to check out Daniel talking all things boxing, all things Miami Heat, and all things pro wrestling, including Jade McCargill making the switch over to WWE, her new deal with WWE. You can check out Daniel in the Inscriber podcast. You can check him out on Twitter at Rawkus, RAWKUZ99. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, you know what it is with me on Twitter, Brother JR76. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, and fragrance, and you can check out my scent of the day for cologne heads, fragrance heads. For those who are in Fragcom, shout out Team Smell Good Family. You can do all of that with me on IG and TikTok, including my fragrance that I put out today. Dapper Fragrances, their inspiration of Bodicea, Blue Sapphire. Because why isn't it the inspiration? Because I refuse to pay the $1,200 to $1,400 for a single bottle of Bodicea Blue Sapphire. So why not get the inspiration for versions? But anyway, you can check all that out on IG and TikTok, Brother JRSC. On the next episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, we will do a recap of all the fights that's happening on October 7th. The Manchester card featuring Lee Wood, Josh Warrington, as well as Terri Harper and Cecilia Brækhus. That's going to be on DAZN. Also on DAZN in Las Vegas. We'll do a recap of Zerda Ramirez and Joe Smith. We'll do a recap of the Evelin Bermudez defending her unified junior flyweight titles against former champion Kim Clavel. That's going to take place in Canada. Also, recap of the Shigeoka brothers who are fighting for world titles in Tokyo. The older Shigeoka brother, Yudai, he's going to fight Panya Pradabsri, WBC 100 and 5-pound champion. He's Ginjiro. He's going to fight the rematch against Daniel Valladares, who is IBF 105-pound champion. Again, those two fights are going to happen in Tokyo. Uh, we will recap all of those matchups, and we will have a preview of uh, middleweight unification bout between WBO champion Janabek Alakunluli, IBF champion Vincenzo Galataри. That fight is going to happen in Texas. You can see that on ESPN Plus on the undercard of that. Rising prospects of Keyshawn Davis, Richard Torres, Duke Reagan, all going to fight on that card. And also on the 14th, the first title defense for Tim Tszyu, who is now WBO junior middleweight champion. He's defending the title against Brian Mendoza. So we will talk about all of those fights on the next episode. Again, I want to thank everybody who's checked us out on YouTube. Thank everybody in the live chat this evening. For Gail of nyfights.com, for Daniel of 4 Boxing News, and the Inscriber, shout out to you, Beagle. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Hope to keep listening, and while you at it, continue. While you at it, please share the show on all of your particular platforms. Again, on the next episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, we will do all of those recaps and previews that I mentioned. For Gail from nyfights.com, for Daniel of 4 Boxing News, and the Inscriber, I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 421 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. We will see you guys next time. Y'all have a good one. Good evening. Good night.